Hello, 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 my friends in Sasquatch land. It's not Tuesday night, it's Wednesday tonight, and welcome to Discover Sasquatch. BF Bud, how's you doing? Miss Diane Fowler's in the house. Bigfoot breaking news, hello. Congratulations on the new channel. We're all looking forward to it. Hello, Miss Francesca. Glad to see you all here. Tonight, we get out of the Sasquatch realm for a little while, and we dive into ufology, and this is a whole brand new scene for me, and I'm very excited to have been able to get our guest Paige with us tonight. She is STAR Investigator at Mufon, Director of Colorado Mufon, Team Lead on Mufon Mars Project. I don't think it's the Mars Planet, and we'll have her explain that a little later. She is also a co-host on KGRA, like myself, on Mufon What's Up podcast, and an author. She has a book out called Letters of Love and Light, and we will be giving away a copy of that tonight. Also, most recent, she's working on her second book, High Strangeness on the Colorado Ranch, the Colorado Skinwalker Ranch. And I have to say, I reached out to get a hold of her because I wanted to hear more about the ranch, and you guys will be pretty fascinated with what's going on at that place. So she has a huge resume. She's a great person. We had a chance to talk backstage a little while. So without further ado, let's bring her on out, Miss Paige.
Well, that's fun. How you doing, Chris? Thanks for having me on.
Yes, thank you so much for coming and spending a little time with us and at Discover Sasquatch. We got a good crowd already showing up, and
yeah, everybody.
So let's get this thing rolling, and why don't you tell everybody how you got involved in ufology, and from I guess you were a little girl when it all started for you, and up to now, and let's fill everybody in on.
Yeah, just, so many of us end up in kind of these, the paranormal world. I think a lot of these phenomena are connected, and we'll get into that in a while. But I actually kind of started out being really interested in the paranormal world. I was really into the ghost hunters and doing ghost tours at, the St. Augustine Lighthouse and this Stanley Hotel and that, because I had a lot of paranormal things happen to me as a kid. When I was a young girl, I had spent time on this Colorado ranch that I never knew anybody knew anything about, or I never knew it was investigated or anything like that. And then, like so many of us do, I got hooked on all these documentaries and whatnot. And I learned about MUFON in 2012. And I thought, I wonder what all that high strangeness was on that ranch when I was young. So I came in right in as a field investigator with MUFON and kind of worked my way up through STAR team. The Mars program is actually the MUFON archive research and redacting team. So for 3 years, we went through all the pre-CMS computerized cases. MUFON's been around since 1969, kind of the same as we took over where Project Blue Book left off, which we now know, the Air Force never really got out of it. But anyway, that's a whole other story. But so we spent 3 years redacting all the personal private information. So those old files on paper, they were all digitized and could be used for investigators and researchers. So that's what that program was about. And I've just been diving in deep on this ranch now for almost a decade. And, even though this happened in the late 70s, people are like, well, why are you still researching this? And because it had so many different phenomena, including Sasquatch sightings, which we'll get into. But and a lot of this has never been solved, and it's still continuing to this day. Not to the height that it was back in the late 70s. This is where Linda Moulton Howe got her start, and we'll get into that later. So it's just an ongoing, like so many of you, and I know, Chris, we were talking before the show, you just sort of get down this rabbit hole, and it it never ends.
Right. I'm fascinated by the UFO now, and it's a whole nother world. If you get into the Sasquatch world, and that's its own world in itself. Now you jump over to the UFO side of it, and it's a whole nother community, a whole nother everything again. And I think they're linked. I think it's all linked together. I think you follow the path, like I was telling you earlier. I'm just a 53-year-old grandfather that collected baseball cards, and I went from Sasquatch sighting to UFO sighting to having uh, thoughts left in my, I guess, words left in my head, pictures in my head. I showed you that picture of the female Bigfoot or
Mhm.
Sasquatch the other night.
Yeah.
It's crazy how it all links up, and
So
so
did
like
you have a UFO sighting? What got you into ufology? I'm just curious.
I had the UFO sighting. Me and Maria and myself were going out. I'm a little nervous tonight. I'm all wound up about this, so I'll take a deep breath. Let's relax. I'm talking a mile a minute. So Maria and myself were going out to vote, and we walked out the door, and I'm going around the car, and all of a sudden I look up, and there's this craft right over our heads. It's huge. It's the size of a football field.
My
Huge,
goodness.
huge, huge. And I'm going, Maria, because this is the second time we've seen one together. She's seen one 5 o'clock in the afternoon in August, like 3 years prior.
Wow.
Well, I'm like, Maria, look up there. She looks, that's just a plane. I'm like, and then I started walking down and I'm watching and I'm walking down the building with, I'm like, Maria, you got to get out here and look at this. This is not an airplane. She gets out and she looks up and she's like, oh my God.
What
What?
shape was it?
It was all, wait, I think I might have it loaded up here somewhere. And I might not. It was the shape. It was like an old, but it was
Oh,
all
wow.
triangle panels, and they were copper color. I don't think I loaded
Interesting.
it up. Yeah, and it had three lights on it. It had a white, yellow light on the front, and a red light on one side, and a blue on the other side. And it just hovered. It didn't make a sound. And when it banked like you could see the top of it. And then it went up,
Wow.
and then it would straighten out, and it was just never a noise, never just floating. And then it went up the hill. We got in the car and we chased it. Got up in the car, I went up the hill, it took a left, and then got to the woods and poof, gone.
Whoa.
Now the
Yeah.
crazy part about now, even that's not crazy enough. The crazy part about it was that there was people out in the parking lot when we're pointing up saying, look at that. And they never even acknowledged us. It
Really?
was like we weren't even there. And to this day, Maria still scratches her head over it. She's like, they had to hear us. They had to see us. We were right in front of them. They were taking the groceries out of their car.
I've
And
heard of that happening before. I don't know what that is, but you're not the first time that I've heard that to
yeah,
happen. So
it was like we
interesting.
were meant to see that. It was like
Right.
only us, and we were caught in that whatever it was. And after that, I'm just like, whew.
And now here you are doing this. Maybe that's why you were meant to see it, to make these connections.
Right. Well, yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
all. And then I knew people, I didn't know, like I said, I reached out to Dave Scott and then Bill said, oh, Bill knows you. And all these people knew you. And to honest to God, I'm not into the ufology part. And I really didn't hear about your name until I started looking into the ranch.
Yeah.
And you're pretty well known in the ufology world and UFO world or whatever you want to call it. And so we reached out and here you are. And I'm very excited to have you here and to
Well,
learn more about
thanks.
the subject. And hopefully things go well on my end because I don't know too much about it. So we'll keep the things rolling. So when my research and what I've looked up on you, it's like you thrive on going into those old records. You like digging into the
I
paperwork.
do.
You like linking everything up. You want to get those little bits and pieces. Because you never know, it could crack a case wide open.
Right.
What
Well,
was your favorite case when you were doing all that, when you were redacting through all those files and everything, and you put the pieces together? Which one did you really really enjoy working on?
Well, selfishly, like I said, I kind of got into this to solve my own puzzle because one of the questions I had about this ranch out there in Elbert County, Colorado, let me backtrack a little bit. So I never knew anybody knew anything about it. In 2013, I came across a book called Hunt for the Skinwalker, and I didn't know anything about the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. And I just thought, well, maybe this would have some commonalities. It's a ranch. It had these strange things that happened. So I purchased the book. And there's a chapter in that book called Other Hotspots. And in there, they talk about this Colorado ranch. And I knew the weird dynamics of the family, even though they had changed the name of the town and the people. And in that book, I learned of Dr. Leo Sprinkle, Ph.D., was one of the original investigators out on that ranch, along with John Durr, who was a seismologist, Ph.D., and Peter Van Arsdale, Ph.D. They were out there researching the ranch. And Dr. Leo Sprinkle lives 2.5 hours away from me in Laramie, Wyoming. He's old school. He was, for those listeners who don't know, Dr. Leo Sprinkle was a psychologist out of Laramie, Wyoming. And he, for over 40 years, was really interested in the contact abduction phenomenon and was a well-known hypnotist. And so I wrote to Dr. Leo Sprinkle right away, and he confirmed to me that, yes, this was indeed the ranch of my childhood. And he still has 74 boxes of all his years of work, people that wrote him letters, his research, his documents, and they're housed at the Heritage Center there in Laramie, and anybody can go and pull these documents. So of course I get in the car the next weekend and I go meet Leo, and I pulled the documents from the ranch, and it's been just a whirlwind ever since. I think documents are really important because, people, especially in ufology and also probably in the Sasquatch world, without documents, it's just all kind of like hearsay and story, all that. So when I was pulling newspaper articles and actual sketches and drawings and reports from the original case, it really helped in my research. But I also got lost in all the letters. That's how the book came to be. I spent 3.5 years going back and forth to the archives, pulling letters from people that had written to Dr. Sprinkle. And so I organized them to different chapters. So I have like ET craft descriptions and on hypnosis, letters from children, letters from Leo. A common theme where people would write to Leo saying, I've had this vivid dream. It seems so real. I'm not sure if it was a dream or if I was abducted, those kind of things. So that was a definite labor of love. But so many things happened out on that ranch property, including Sasquatch sightings. So
When you were young, what was some of the stuff that happened out there before you even knew that about the ranch when you were younger?
right. So my mom was dating the gentleman that owned the ranch, and they had 3 sons, and the 2 younger sons lived with us during the week, about an hour away from the ranch, and they attended a larger school district. So we would drive them back and forth to the ranch, and sometimes we'd spend weekends out there. And my older sister and I, one occasion, were tossing the frisbee on a snowy spring Colorado day. Those of you who've been to Colorado, we get this wet, heavy snow in the springtime, and yet the sun is shining. It's nice, so we're just tossing the frisbee. I'm like 10 years old at the time. My sister's 16. And we looked down and we had a large circle that was snowless and completely dry where nothing grew. And I just remember that being very unusual. And when I get the original briefing document on the case, there were 2 of these snowless circles on the ranch property. The one was 75 feet in diameter. So that was interesting. One of the scariest nights out there, it was the boys' mother's birthday, and the adults were playing board games. One of the first things that were reported on this ranch were these strange humming sounds and these bangs from underground, almost like wind turbines or something under the ground there, which makes me think of, and we kind of talked about this, David Pilates' new film with the UFO connection. He talks of these aquifers and that, and I'm wondering what's under the ground there at this ranch property. But so we're hanging out in the boys' bedroom, the 3 boys and my sister and I, and this humming sound starts up. All the power in the house goes out. We see the brightest light, brighter than the sun, come through the window. And at that time, you have to remember, all the power is out. This disembodied electrical sounding voice came through the house, basically warning us to, your friends will be instructed to remain silent concerning us. And we got in the car, drove home that night. It was a really scary night. And from that moment on, my mom and the adults in our lives were like, you don't talk to anybody about what's going on out there. The biggest thing out there in Elbert County, this was in a little town called Kiowa, the mutilations were almost occurring daily. And these weren't just cow, but horse and sheep and even dog. There was a $10,000 reward to find these people committing these mutilations. Linda Moulton Howe did a film out there called A Strange Harvest about these cattle mutilations. Christopher O'Brien and Chuck Zukowski are really well-known researchers on that phenomenon. But so, we had sheriffs out in planes. We had people with loaded shotguns by the door because these things were occurring so often and for a number of years. These unmarked helicopters were sighted all the time. Orange big balls of light flying on and off the property, UFO sightings. There were 2 types of ET beings spotted on the ranch. I never witnessed those, but the adults on the ranch property did. So one thing I learned really quickly was what I thought was isolated to the ranch property actually, hundreds of people through Elbert County experienced in the town of Kiowa, Elizabeth, Franktown, Simla, Rama. So it was this whole vast area in eastern Colorado that was experiencing this high strangeness activity.
Do you think the military, because the military has surrounded this ranch basically in
Yes.
every corner, do you think they had a lot to do with what was going on at the ranch?
I do. And that's been another reason why documents are so important in doing FOIA requests and that, because that's always been my question. It's sort of like the chicken and the egg, which came first? Was there paranormal activity and UFOs and mutilations being done? And then the Air Force was aware of this, so they came in, or was there black access projects? And, I think there's some documents that I found in Dr. Sprinkles that stated there was, a soldier from Fort Carson out there, Warren, and they redacted his last name, from Camp Carson, was out on the ranch property. He said he felt something take over his mind. He would be released. It would made him walk towards the woods, because in the back of the ranch, there was a big patch of ponderosa pines. So this area, just to give your listeners an idea, it's a lot of flat ranch land that's treeless, but there was big patches of ponderosa pines as well. So for me, the Sasquatch phenomenon is really interesting because it's not a location like in the Rocky Mountains, like up in Bailey, Colorado, in the Rocky Mountains, where, excuse the term, but it's kind of squatchy area, right? But out in Elbert County, it's not. I don't think a family of Sasquatch could live there full time undetected. You would see them because there's too much flat land and so little trees. But yet there were Sasquatch beings, and they were reported to be directly connected to the craft. And in fact, there's a book by Stan Gordon. Are you familiar with Stan Gordon and his work? He wrote a book. It's on my shelf here. I could grab it really quick so I could tell your listeners what it's called. But he actually links the Sasquatch and the UFOs together quite often. Let me grab this really quick.
Okay.
This one.
Okay, Silent Invasion, the Pennsylvania UF book.
It's a really great book. And he actually, there's a case in here that's very similar to the ranch as well, in Ohiopyle, Pennsylvania, called the UFO creature case. And he talks about that in here. But to me, when I got the briefing document from Dr. Sprinkle, there were these strange disappearing boxes. And that's another thing I witnessed in the daytime. We were in the pickup truck driving through the ponderosa pines. We get out of the truck, and in the tree line was this box. It had lights on it. It was emitting a strange sound. And they're like, "Get in the truck. It's the box. It's the box." And we jump in the truck. We look back and the box was gone. Sounds really strange, but it was also reported at Skinwalker Ranch and also Trey Hudson's ranch down south. But in this report, it says that those boxes were lethal. And in fact, it took down a Sasquatch. So it had a Sasquatch approach the box and it dropped him to his knees. So I don't know. And when I talked to my sister about it, she's like, maybe they are like bodyguards or workers, or they somehow were connected to the craft. And I truly believe, at least in the case of the Colorado Ranch, that these are interdimensional beings.
Now, you mentioned there was reports of 2 different types of aliens. For all of us that don't know the different types, I know there's grays, and I'm not familiar with the other ones. That's probably the only one I really know. What types of aliens were reported there?
Right. Well, of course, anybody who tells you they have the answers to these things, I mean, really, nobody truly does, first of all. But we do have all those species of aliens that are commonly reported, right? The grays, the short grays, the tall grays, the reptilians, the Nordics, the Pleiadians, and on and on. But out on the ranch, when I went to get the documents from Dr. Leo Sprinkle, there were sketches of the Sasquatch creature and also one of the ET beings that were seen out there. And it was very unusual looking, like nothing I've ever seen in a book or a magazine or a movie or anything like that. So I kind of put it in my back pocket and didn't share it with anybody. And it's kind of got this alien-esque head, smaller eyes, not the big wraparound eyes, heavy brow, wrinkles on its forehead, wrinkles around the mouth, and it had these strange tubes, these spindly arms, and this kind of like rectangular, almost shield box thing over its chest area. It was very unusual. And I always kind of thought maybe this was an AI type of being. I wonder if it's connected to that electrical voice or the boxes. But what was really fascinating to me is not too long after I had that drawing, we invited a guest to Colorado Mufon. His name's Sean Bartok, and he wrote a book called Flashbacks. And he had property, which I found out later was only 14 miles away from our ranch property. And I was sitting there watching his presentation, and he had these two sketches of these ET beings that he saw on his property a few years later. And I mean, you couldn't get any closer. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, that was mind blowing to me. And then the other type of being that was seen there were these Nordics, these tall blondes. Yeah.
And David's new film there, the UFO, the missing 411 UFO link. He mentioned one with the black spandex. I've heard that before in other
Yeah.
cases. Was that one of them that ever showed up at the ranch out there, or is that just a whole
Yeah, that one wasn't seen at the ranch, but it's interesting going through the archives and stuff and digging through so many documents. It's interesting how in ufology, the trends sort of change, and I wonder if a lot of that is just popular movies or folklore at the time. Because if you look, into the 70s, for example, you heard about a lot of these ETs in like suits or had emblems or or landings where they're working on the craft and that kind of thing. You don't so much hear that anymore. Um, Travis Walton, the famous abduction of Travis Walton in Snowflake, Arizona, was in 1975. Those kind of reports were very typical of that era. Now, of course, in MUFON, we get a lot of these Tic Tac sightings, right? Since the Nimitz and all that came out. So it's interesting how, however, that being said, if you read through some of these documents, the Tic Tacs might have just been described a little differently because back in the day, we called them oblong, right? Or right. And those are Tic Tac shapes. So just the verbiage has changed, but I think we've been seeing Tic Tacs for decades.
I dug
Yeah.
up a picture real quick of the one I seen. That's what we
Oh,
seen. It was solid, but I tried to do it at
wow.
different angles, and I couldn't get it to color in, but that's the color it was.
That is
Um,
so interesting to me, and I'll tell you why. And I've really never talked about this before, but a few years, it's probably been 3 or 4 years ago now. I was driving down Smoky Hill Road in Colorado near my home, and I'm driving down, and there's traffic everywhere, and I see this large ball, and it was that same color. It was copper. It was a copper color, and I'm slowing way down. I'm pulling over. Nobody else is. I'm like, why isn't anybody else stopping? It was not a drone. It was the strangest looking metallic thing I've ever seen. I pulled a U-turn so I can find it, see if anybody's flying some weird thing. It was just gone. It just disappeared. Now it wasn't that large. It was a small one, but it was that same color. So that's really interesting.
yeah, that is interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting. So Dr. Sprinkle, I guess I was reading a little bit about him. He would hypnotize his patients, and I guess you were hypnotized by him at one time. And
I
it took you a
was.
little while to listen to what was actually said. Do you feel comfortable in sharing that, or is that
Yeah,
still?
I can share it. I mean, of course, I wanted to pull more memories of what was happening. And, one thing in particular, for years and years and years until just recently, I compartmentalized all the different types of phenomenon, like the paranormal ghost sightings. I had these tall shadow figures in my room when I was a kid, these blue balls of orb lights that I would see, these different phenomenon. I never connected to the ranch. I never connected it to UFOs. I kind of kept them separate. And it really wasn't until the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon came out where they were discussing that a lot of these shadow beings and orbs are seen with people that visit Skinwalker Ranch and other high strangeness locations. And I'm like, oh, holy moly, like because these would happen at my house an hour away from the ranch. So that's why I separated, like, here's what happened at the ranch and here's what happened at my home. But according to other people that have had very similar experiences, something attaches to you and it sort of follows you. And I think that's what happened in my case. So what was your original question? You asked about Dr. Sprinkle. Oh yeah, the hypnosis. So I was curious about, like, if I could pull any memories. So Dr. Sprinkle put me under for an hour and a half. It took me a week to listen back. And I thought it was curious, since we were kind of told never to talk about what happened out there. The first 20 minutes of my hypnosis was me it was like my little girl self trying to stand up to the adults and able to just even talk about it, period. So after getting through that, I started talking about things, and I don't claim to be an abductee or a contactee, and I still question what came through on my hypnosis. But basically, my voice changed to a little girl's voice, and I was like, and I wasn't scared. It was like creepy, and but basically, I was describing the inside of a craft that had this big transparent window, and I was looking down at a green field and seeing these hybrid kids, and I was scared and confused, but the beings around me, that they were gentle and soft and kind and that kind of thing. And then I also said in my hypnosis that they were like well-oiled machines, like streamlined, well-oiled machines, and they were creating hybrids to get more emotion and feeling and individuality back into their species. But it was a delicate balance. So that's what came through. I'm not sure what I think about it, but it is what it is. And, just to go through that experience of being hypnotized, because, I was always under the impression, you watch the thing and, you're like, I will do whatever you say. But it wasn't like that at all. You're just in like this deep meditative state, and they you're able to talk. I kept my eyes closed the whole time, but you're able to converse and talk, and you're just super, super relaxed, kind of like a biofeedback training.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I know
So
exactly what
yeah.
that
Have
feeling
you
is.
ever been hypnotized before?
No, but I do meditate. I've been meditating for the last couple months, and I know that place you go to when you're there. You get
Yeah.
that feeling like it's like you're electrified, and you're so relaxed, and it's hard to really explain, but you're there. I mean,
Right. Right. Yeah.
I can't do it all the time to get that relaxed because we have grandkids here, and
Yeah. Yeah.
they're all
Right.
over the place.
Yeah, but and there's techniques too I find interesting, because I've done even like past life regressions in the past. I was part of this group in Denver called the Psychic Development Group, and it was this large group. We'd get together every Friday night, practice reading on one another, and do past life regressions, and just different astro traveling and things like that. And it's really interesting because some of the techniques you can use that really help trigger memories are just like looking at what you're wearing on your feet, looking at the carpet, trying to remember smells or posters in your room. And if you can remember some of those things, it actually snowballs and it triggers other memories. And that's what was happening for me. So, yeah.
This is what came to me when I was in meditation: the name and the face.
Natari.
Natari.
Natari. Natari.
I guess it
Natari.
I
It's
guess it's
almost like a woodland creature.
yeah. I think it's a young Sasquatch is what I think she is. And Natari
Oh,
was actually the first Native American saint. She was yeah, heard that name. I've never even know that name. I've never said in my entire life
and
ever.
it
And
just came through, and that's what it
when I
was.
was doing that meditation, I heard na 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 na
No,
na
no,
na
no.
na na, and then it would get quiet, and then I heard Tari, Tatari, and then
Natari.
right at the end it said, "Look at I got my hairs,"
Goosebumps.
and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden at the end it said Natari, and then I jumped and I came out, and that
Wow.
basic.
Things like that happen, these synchronicities, and I mean, to a mind-blowing degree. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced, I'm sure a lot of your listeners experience. In fact, just happened to me last week. A couple months ago, a gentleman reached out to me that knew Jeffrey Saylor. So if you go to YouTube and you search the Buffalo Ranch, Jeffrey Saylor's, there's this Jeffrey Saylor's Chronicles, and his Buffalo Ranch was really close to the Elbert County Ranch. They're almost back to back, right? And he experienced a lot of unusual things and buffalo mutilations and strange things with triangles painted. I mean, just, paranormal things, light orbs, all of it. And so I've been trying to reach out to this gentleman for a while. I haven't been able to find him. Well, I get just out of the blue months ago an email or a message from this person named Brad. He's like, "Hey, I know Jeffrey Saylor's and some of the sheriffs from back in the day. I would love to have an interview with you." And I put it out of my mind and it just kind of never happened. Well, I had a friend here visiting from out of town and I'm like, "Let me drive you around Kiowa and where the ranch is." We're driving through literally the town where the Buffalo Ranch is, and I get a ding on my phone. "Hey, are we ever going to have that interview?" I'm like, "You're not going to believe this, but I'm in the town right now and I'm going to go see my sister in Parker." And there he's like, "I'm in Parker. Let's have an interview." And that day we had an hour-long interview, and from that I have other names to go interview. So synchronicities like that happen quite often. Another case, you asked me what cases are, and I hate to bring out the old stereotypical Roswell case from 1947, but there's a Denver connection to the Roswell case. And years ago, about 4.5 years ago now, a case came across my desk, and there was a Brigadier General Arthur Exxon who said that one of the Roswell bodies ended up in a mortuary outfit in Denver. And of course, we have Lowry and Fitzsimmons, right? And President Eisenhower and his wife Mamie's from Denver. So there's this whole Denver, Colorado connection to the Roswell incident. And so I've been researching this for a number of years. And another strange synchronicity that happened, my mother at the time, she's 91 years old now, she's still alive, but she was in an independent living home and she wanted me to do a ufology 101 presentation. And I'm like, sure. So I put together a little presentation for the folks there. And I was talking about the Denver body Roswell connection and this judge who had a hold on this body for decades. And he was a federal judge appointed by Nixon. And one of the residents goes, "Sure. Oh, his widow's on the 5th floor. You want me to go get her?" I'm like, "What? What are the chances of that happening?" So I did 2 interviews with her. I mean, those kind of things happen a lot. And I feel very much like once you kind of get into this field and you're on the right path and everybody plays a different role and has different pieces of the puzzle, that we're sort of led and guided to do what it is we're supposed to do,
Right. We're gonna have to have you back on the show and talk about the Roswell because
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
last 2 weeks I found a lot of stuff about Roswell that I never knew just watching your interviews on it. And
Yeah.
we're gonna have to have you come back if you want and
Oh, yeah. I'd love to.
the whole Roswell show because it'll blow your mind, people, that the stuff that went on down there.
Roswell is real. Yeah, I wasn't sure. It's kind of interesting. I came into this field kind of as a skeptic, really thinking a lot of the things on that ranch was the military and Black Access Project. Now I'm still thinking at least half of it is, but there's no way with all the interviews and all the things I've researched and seen since, there's no way that this phenomenon isn't real. I'm 1,000%, I believe that to be true. And in fact, even on the ranch, some of the interviews, there's just no way the military men and women could have just pulled off all these unusual things. There's just no way.
There's so much in common with everything in the Sasquatch world that goes on with your world. Also, the
Yeah.
triangles. There's triangle patterns. The orbs are affiliated with them. They're often seen together. They're often seen together with aliens. There's a there's a link between the two. And
Do you think that some of the Sasquatch are linked to UFOs and aliens and others aren't?
that I can't tell you. I mean, in my opinion, I think there's like different classes of Sasquatch. I think they've been here for a long time, and I think there's like, how could I explain it? You remember the show Land of the Lost
Yeah.
with what was the little guy's name there, Chihuahua or whatever they called him. I can't remember his name, but they had the Slee Stack, and they had the Slee Stack with the crystals. He was in control. He could mind speak. he could speak to the people on the thing. I think there's like higher classes. There's a Sasquatch that are more intelligent, and then I think there are less intelligent, like apes or almost apes. They're too
Oh,
smart to be
interesting.
called classified as apes. Too well organized. They stay. I mean, but that's what I think.
Yeah.
And
Isn't there a book called Psychic Sasquatch? I think there is. I'm not sure if it's on my. I do have a whole shelf of just Sasquatch stuff. I need to read more on it. And like you, I wasn't really aware of how big the Bigfoot Sasquatch world was until I went on a couple investigations to the South Skinwalker Ranch there with Trey Hudson and Grumpy Bob, and he was on Bigfoot Hunters and things like that. And I got to learn more about the Bigfoot world and had some really interesting conversations with him. And that topic came up, the psychic Sasquatch, and something that kept coming to me the first time I went out with Trey to do investigations. We were loaded with equipment, FLIR cameras and recorders, and they had guns for safety and just every piece of equipment you can imagine. And I kept getting like this message, like when I was a little girl on the ranch, I had no equipment, yet I was in tune to the energies of the land. And I really felt like if I was going to connect to a Sasquatch or a crypto creature or even the ET creatures or these lights, I was seeing these lights in the trees. I don't know what those lights are. Some people call them fairy lights. That I had to get rid of all that equipment and just really feel the energy of it. And I don't know if you guys do that as well. Also something that I find fascinating too, that they did out on the Colorado ranch is they would bait it. And the activity would increase, and they would bait it with silver and turquoise. And this would increase the activity. I don't know why, but that's what they did.
the Sasquatch activity or the orbit activity.
Both the ET and the Sasquatch activity, because I truly believe, at least on the ranch property, that the Sasquatch and the UFO activity was hand in hand. I think they were together.
It could very well be. Like again,
Yeah,
nobody knows the answers, and
right.
hopefully one day we will find out the answers.
Yeah.
So there was three PhDs on the ranch at the time when you were young. Um, what were some of the stories that what were some of the interactions, experiences that they have while they were
Well, it's interesting. It's a mixed bag. John Durr, I recently reached out to. He's living back east now, and he's a seismologist. And through his research, he thinks a lot of these orb and light phenomenons are actually caused what he calls earthquake lights. And Colorado does get its share of seismic earth. We don't feel them; they're very low on the Richter scale. However, I just, with all the activity that went out there, I can't say as I agree with him that was all just caused by earthquake lights, kind of like swamp gas, kind of thing. So,
right.
and then Dr. Leo Sprinkle actually, felt there was a lot going on there, obviously. But another rumor back in the day, the family that owned the ranch that I knew kind of had a reputation when they came into the small town, because they moved from the big city and they always dreamed of owning a cattle ranch. And so here they are, mid 70s, and the long hair was coming into style. So they thought they were all on drugs. These hippies moved in from the inner city. They're all on drugs. They're all crazy, and it kind of wasn't taken all that seriously at the time because they wrote them off. Interestingly enough, the gentleman that my mom was dating later became a police officer. And I have to laugh. Me and my sister were kind of teasing about this, but he never did a drug in his life. He had his like briefcase and his little Vespa, and he was just like, no, that wasn't an element. Not only that, but it didn't just impact the people on the ranch. This was a phenomenon in that whole area. So quickly, when I got a hold of, talked to Dr. Sprinkle and John Durr all these years later, I'm like, we could put that rumor to bed. That was not the case. So, we've had to dispel some of that. And also a big rumor at the time was a lot of this activity and mutilations were done by cults, these satanic cults. And we can safely rule that out as well, because the sheriff, I flew to Florida and interviewed the sheriff there at the time was Bill Waugh. I interviewed his wife, Jean, and his son, his widow. And they had a map in the police station of all the mutilations that were occurring. One would be happening up in Montana, one would be in Colorado, and almost happening simultaneously. So this just, this was going on all across a whole down the Midwest from, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Texas, Utah, Kansas, Nebraska, just boom, this whole area. Colorado was hit the hardest by far, and especially right in there in Elbert County. And it's still going on to this day. This activity, not to the height that it was, but a lot of ranchers will not report mutilations anymore because they know they don't get reimbursed. They don't want the stigma. They know nothing's going to happen, that kind of thing.
Why do you think they happen? Well, what's the purpose? Well, what do they get out of it?
I know just recently the news came out that, the mutilation phenomenon has been solved. It's 100% our military testing the groundwater and the dirt for mad cow disease and, missile and chemicals and all that. But maybe 50% of them maybe could have been done by the military. I don't believe all of them were. There's just too many high strangeness with a lot of these accounts. One in particular, I drove up to Wyoming and interviewed a witness by the name of Sheila. And Sheila's family kind of pioneered the town of Kiowa. If you go into the Elbert County Museum, you read a lot about her family. And so they were cattle ranchers out there. And right out of high school, she was married and moved to a huge acreage in a cattle ranch out in Rama, which just backs to Elbert County. It's just right there. And her husband was out on horseback checking the cows for calves and came across a dead calf. The calf had 4 cuts in a perfect square, and the top of the fur was removed, but the skin was still on the bottom, was dead. He gets on the horse, goes back and gets Sheila. They come back in the pickup truck. She said it took 25, 30 minutes to get there. And by the time they got back, that calf had been completely mutilated, cauterized, organs removed, blood drained. They said there was no tire marks, no footprints. The only tracks were the tracks left by the horse from her husband. No sounds. They were miles off the county road. So she's like, it's not like somebody could just pull over off the county road and do this to the calf. She said they felt like they were being watched. It was super eerie. And she found the photographs. She messaged me on Facebook. You're not going to believe it. I found the pictures of that calf, and it's incredible. And not only did she have pictures of that calf, she had pictures of another calf where a coyote will jump up on a calf and just tear at it while it's alive. So she had pictures of that, and you can compare the two. The military did not do that. They would have heard helicopters. They would have caught them in the act. So it's cases like that, or big, huge buffalo that appear to be just dropped from above, and then a log will be underneath of them or something. And there was never a gnat or bug on these cattle that were mutilated. Wildlife like mountain lions or coyotes wouldn't come eat off of it. They would circle these carcasses and never go up to them and never eat them.
All right. Well, that could
really strange things. Yeah.
I've seen moose pictures of them up in the tree, with the top of the tree through their midsection. So everybody, would claim that it'll be Sasquatch doing it, but it could be UFO dropping the moose when they're done and it just falling on the tree. I find that pretty interesting. Now that the calf picture, is that one of the pictures you shared with me?
Yeah. I don't know if you got the pictures or not, but I think I did. Yeah.
I got them. So everybody, this is a little graphic, but we're going to share it because it goes with the show. So I'm going to put it up now.
There it is. Yep. That one on the left is the actual picture of the calf with the organs removed and the cauterized. And the one on the left is a coyote kill. So you can see the difference there. Right. Yeah. Those are the actual photos from my witness.
I just don't know. They must need the organs, or they study the organs, or...
Did I send you the picture of the 2 Sasquatch sketches?
Yep. I got them all. Whichever one you want to see, I got them all loaded up.
Yeah, because the one there was the one on the left there, the one that's darker, was the Sasquatch that was seen on the ranch property. And when I was a kid, my mom referred to them as white fuzzies because they had gray and white hair. The one on the left, there's a well-known person in ufology by the name of Robert Solis, or Bob Solis, and he has seen one of my presentations in Laughlin, and he had written me this nice email talking about airmen in Malmstrom who would see UFOs and Bigfoot together. or Sasquatch together. And one of these airmen passed one of the polygraphs in 1977, and that was the sketch of the one he saw in connection with UFO. And to me, the way the nose is, the mouth is, kind of the sparse hair, they look almost identical to one another. And it was the same years. So I felt that was really fascinating. That one came out of Montana.
And the
So
big black eyes, and
and
they all
and how they're round like that, and the nose is the same, the mouth is the same, and that sparse hair. Like, I think of Bigfoot Sasquatch as being super thick and dark hair, and these were like kind of sparse. Yeah.
pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. So, when did you return to the ranch? When did you return? When it was your to start investigating?
Well, I've been in the town and I've driven by the ranch. It is now a gated property, and I have, there's exciting news coming, but I can't actually visit the people that live there now and for another month or so, until after a certain non-disclosure I had to sign about it. But I'm hoping by the spring or summer we'll be back out on the ranch property to do some research and soil samples. And actually, looking over the property on Google Earth, there's a really interesting, it almost looks like an Orion's belt kind of thing back in the tree line. So I can't wait to get back there and actually see what this is. The middle star of Orion's belt casts a shadow. So I don't know if it's a trough or what it is, because it casts a shadow. But then they're perfectly placed, just like as an Orion's belt. I don't know if they're big boulders or what they are, but it's a very unusual. And you can see it. You know how you could go on Google Earth and go back in time? It's there for years. So I'm curious to get on the property and see what that is. So I can't wait to get on that property here. The first time back will be the first week in February. So in a few weeks, I'm a little nervous to go back, especially at night, because the energy there is quite heavy. And I always had a sense of being watched when I was a kid. That actually stayed with me until like my mid 40s. So I'm curious to see if the energy still feels that same way as I remember it feeling. And when I went to Vernal, Utah, just this last year, I got to go visit the Blind Frog Ranch, and I was curious about how the energy felt there with Dwayne Ollinger and that. And the energy there was quite good. It was quite positive. In fact, I sat in the little healing pond there, which I just did a show the other night. And the host of that show said she sat in the healing pond as well there at the Blind Frog Ranch. And she goes, they're not allowing that anymore. And I'm like, why? And she said, because this big creature slithered out of the lake. I'm like, what? You got to be, I can't believe I did that. But anyway, and I've never been at the Skinwalker Ranch, so I'm really curious what the energy feels there as well. Something I did do, because the Colorado Ranch isn't really the only high strangeness ranch. There's the Marley Woods in Missouri, and Skinwalker Ranch, and Bradshaw Ranch in Sedona, Trey Hudson's down south, and the Ohio Pile, Pennsylvania Ranch. And so I thought, what do these ranches have in common? And when I looked at the magnetic map of the United States, they all ping the charts as being really, really highly magnetic. And you and I kind of discussed that a little bit. I think that there's a connection to magnetism and also water.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%.
And is that true with Sasquatch as well?
Yep. Everything lines up. It's all in my book. In my opinion, again, it's only my opinion, and I'm just a little guy on the totem pole anyways, but
No, me too.
everything you're talking about, we have uncovered in the Sasquatch world.
So
From the triangle patterns to the mind speak to it's all linked in together. Have you ever experienced the mind speak?
I have a little bit. I mean, again, some of these things are kind of touchy to talk about because, when you're a kid and you lucid dream and you see things in pictures and you feel you think everybody is like that, and then when you grow up and you learn not everybody has those things going on, but very clearly sometimes you feel, I do, and I know a lot of other people do too, feel guided or led or will hear, you know what I'm saying, almost like a telepathic message or whatever. But so yeah, I do experience that from time to time. I don't know what that is, but do you think the Sasquatch could be like an extraterrestrial species?
It could very well be. I couldn't
Yeah.
tell you if and
Yeah.
we have
I've
no
always
proof.
wondered that. Yeah.
Yeah, we have no proof of what they are. Nobody
Right.
knows.
Yeah.
They come here, they sleep here, they eat here, they hunt here, they have babies here. We know all that, but where do they go? Why don't they leave tracks? Why did
Right.
it, how could an 800-pound creature, or I call them a people, so the Sasquatch people I call them, how can an 800-pound person leave one footprint in the middle of a mud field? One
Yeah.
perfect, beautiful,
One print.
and none other. Zero. How? How?
They just must go
Yeah, I don't.
somewhere, you
Yeah,
know. Have you heard the story at Skinwalker Ranch where they had the night vision goggles and they saw actually like a portal or hole open up and like a Bigfoot Sasquatch creature crawl out of it? I mean, I don't, maybe there's something to that. Um, I have 8 acres of land up in Bailey, Colorado, which is very close to Jim Meyer's Sasquatch outpost up there in Bailey. And Bailey, Colorado is one of the hot spots for Sasquatch sightings in the state of Colorado. And, you know, we live pretty close off the highway, so I thought, well, I don't think I'll ever have a Sasquatch encounter. But one spring day, I'm sitting there and we had this really cool lit patio and I had my swing chair out there and I'd like to sit and have a cocktail. I only had one, so I wasn't drunk or anything. And we had just put in a big fountain feature, right? Like a big waterfall feature. And I was waiting for my husband at the time and my daughter to come up, and it was dusk and I heard like a huge branch break in front of the cabin. And it scared me. And I thought, what is that? Well, right after that, I smelled the worst smell I've ever smelled in my whole life. It was the worst smell and it scared me. So I went into the cabin. I waited for them to get back and I told them what had happened. And so we went out of the back of the cabin. By that time, it's dark and that smell was traveling. It was moving. And I thought, well, what the heck is that? So the next morning in daylight, I went out and I was looking for Sasquatch tracks or hair or anything. I didn't find anything. The ground's really dry. There was just nothing. But I wonder if a Sasquatch was curious about this fountain feature and came in to check it out. I don't know. But I did put a pin on Jim Meyer's map at the Sasquatch Museum. It's like
yeah.
I had a smell and a tree break. I didn't see one, but that's sort of like my one encounter that I
Could have
had.
very well been there. I mean, the
Yeah.
smell comes and goes like instantly. You'll smell
Oh, it
rancid
was
smell,
horrible.
and then it'll go away like that. It'll just gone. Just
Yeah. That's what
that
happened.
doesn't happen. Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's just there is no more coincidence in my book. Everything that I run into, everybody I talk to now, you start talking and say, oh yeah, well that happened to me just like tonight. Yeah, well that's happened to me, and I've seen that copper colored ship before,
Yeah,
and
right.
I mean it's just a quantum entanglement. That's what I call it.
Agreed.
We've tried to doing experiments with that when we had Ron Moorhead on the. He wrote a book called Quantum Bigfoot, and we did an experiment after we had him on the show, and things happened. It happened to me, but it happened backwards, but it happened here, and uh, it's just frequencies and all that stuff is just all linked in together, and I
Right.
think
There's a great book out by Grant Cameron called The Contact Modalities. I just recently purchased that and I'm reading that, but it seems talking about entanglement and learning about these things. I've gone through phases of kind of getting into that and out, and just recently subscribed back to Gaia television and that. And for whatever reason, the last couple weeks, all this magnetism stuff is coming up. Like every show I'm watching, every person I talk to, David Pilates and the aquifers and the magnet, all this stuff. I'm like, okay, there's something to this. Somebody's trying to get a message through, So I'm really excited to kind of experiment with some of these things and dive deep into, if there's any synchronicities to these high strangeness locations and magnetism, and if we can interact with this more. I feel hopeful that we'll someday be able to open up these portals or interact. I'm hoping in my lifetime we'll see that.
yeah, well, I don't
Yeah.
know. Elon Musk is making some huge steps right now. That computer that you can control by your brain is out of this.
Oh, the Neuralink.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
just
kind of
great.
scary stuff.
That's
That's
this
scary
scary
stuff.
stuff. Can you
That's scary
imagine
stuff.
what they could do with that? It's just I don't even think it should be made, to tell you the
Yeah,
truth.
no, I don't either.
So
I want to keep our humanity here.
so you have also been to the Meadow, and
Yes. Yeah.
another high strangeness place that has the clear cube in it, the box.
Yes. Yep.
You've been there a couple of times. Could you
Yeah.
fill us in a little bit about the meadow?
Well, yeah, it's a really I wouldn't want to call it eerie, but the energy there is quite different. And both times I went out, we did have electromagnetic things happen to our vehicles, doors automatically locking. The last time I went, me and a couple of investigators went to across from the meadows is another meadows, and they called it the Field of Dreams. So we're like, you guys go check out the meadows. We're headed over to the Field of Dreams. And one thing I have to say about this team, they are so professional and they're so organized and safety first, and they have the radios, and you don't go anywhere alone, and so on and so forth. So it's an impressive team to work with. And so we went out to the Field of Dreams, and I was seeing this like light in the tree, and I'm thinking, oh, it has to be fireflies. It has to be fireflies. I'm looking. Well, it was not the season for fireflies. There was no other fireflies. It was not fireflies. And then all of a sudden, this light, it was just like a square. It was just like boom, boom, and it was gone. So we're getting on the radio, like, bring the flare, bring the flare. What are these lights? And went back the next day in the daytime. I was looking for like nails in the tree or anything reflective, tin cans on the hillside. Like, look, there was nothing. I don't know what these balls of lights were in the trees. So that happened. There's disembodied voices you hear out in the trees, and of course we're always trying to debunk these things like, oh, is it just echoing coming from farther away, blah, blah, blah. And that's another thing I love about this team. One time, the first time I went with my son, and he got his hood pulled back off his head, and one of the other investigators got pushed in the back, and we also saw a light. So we went back the second time where we were trying to debunk those lights. So we had cars going up and down to see if they were headlights. We had people walking with headlamps to see if it could have been that. So we work really hard to debunk the evidence that we're getting out there. So it's just an awesome team. But every time there's been activity out there, so it's really an interesting place.
Now, is that private property, or is that
It is public property, and I know Trey likes to keep it under wraps because he just doesn't want it to be contaminated. A lot of, like so many of the Sasquatch hot spots, right? You don't want people out there goofing off and making howls and doing tree knocks and all this crazy stuff. Same thing out there. He's just trying to keep it clean so that doesn't happen.
No, I understand. I just didn't know if it was private property, and I wouldn't ask where it was if it was private property too. So
right.
Yeah, that's something I don't do. I don't go to other people's places if not invited. It's just against everything that you're taught, and just like I wouldn't want anybody at my spot coming to my area, trying to.
Yeah. And I worry a little bit about that, talking so publicly about Kiowa, Colorado, and Elbert County, like, oh my gosh, people are going to go. But at the same time, I had to think long and hard about giving away the location, because the fact of the matter is all this stuff happened there in the late, from 75 to 78 was the height of it. So it's part of their history. It's part of what happened. The military was very present. We know the Colorado Bureau of Investigations was involved. We know NORAD was involved, the Air Force Academy. We didn't even get into it, but there was a couple of A-7Ds that crashed out there in pursuit of a UFO. So I FOIA'd and got this huge thing back on that. Very, very interesting. They had 255 live rounds of ammunition on board. Supposedly it was an instructor and a student out of Buckley Air Force Base, which is now Space Force. And one of the causes of the crash was that that the instructor misidentified another aircraft and ran into the tail of the student's aircraft. Both A-7Ds crashed, both pilots ejected, both survived. But when I talked to other people in the Air Force, they're like, it's highly, highly unlikely that you would carry live rounds of ammunition over residential neighborhoods at night. It just was very suspicious. And then later, one of my favorite ufologists that I respect, his name is David Marler. David Marler lives outside of Albuquerque and has one of the biggest UFO archives in the whole country. He has all old NICAP and CUFOS and the original Project Blue Book, and he's just acquiring collections from all over the world. And in fact, just got it passed, and it's going to be housed with the state of New Mexico and everything. So he's doing a phenomenal work out there. But I was there visiting, trying to get more research and documents for the ranch area, and I came across a story in the mid 70s at a NORAD that the Canadian NORAD scrambled 2 jets in pursuit of a UFO around that same time. So we know that NORAD has scrambled jets for unknown craft on radar. So I was like, if they did it there, why wouldn't they do it here, kind of thing. So again, that's, research is so important to make those connections.
Yeah, it sure is. But it's
Yeah.
too bad that we don't have that here for Sasquatch, we can't
Oh,
look up police report. I mean, we can do sighting reports and all that, but we don't have fighter jets going down and, chasing things at night with live ammo and,
that we're aware. I mean, in these documents, it did say that NORAD and the Air Force Academy was aware of UFOs and Bigfoot.
right.
It says it in the document. So maybe there's some things. I mean, has anybody really tried to FOIA about that with the military on Bigfoot
I'm
and
sure there
Sasquatch?
has. I mean, I'm sure,
Yeah,
but there's not too much that you can get out of it. They won't.
I'd be
They don't.
curious. I'd be curious. I might
Yeah.
have to do that.
I'm sure there's plenty of sighting reports of that type of nature, but I'm just saying with the fighter jets. I've had a
Right.
helicopter over my house.
Oh, interesting.
We had a Sasquatch sighting in my town, which never happens. And 3 days later, the hummingbird feeder out in front of our house was being drank. The lid was being popped off and drank the hummingbird water. Maria feeds every animal she can, and
Love
they
that.
plucked all the flowers off of the bottom of the feeder and left them in a pile underneath.
Well,
5 days.
hummingbirds can't do that.
No, no.
No,
So
no.
5 days in a row
No
they
bird.
did this. 5 days in a row. The last day
Really?
they took one of the flowers with them, and Maria comes in. Your buddies are out back out again here, and they took one of my flowers now. So she was mad. So the next day she gets out there and she goes in the flowers back. Now she has her 5 flowers back for her feeder. Same scenario though. The lid
How
popped up.
interesting.
That night I'm sitting in bedroom and the grandkids go to take their bath and they turn on the water and my room starts shaking. So I think it's the pipes ready to burst. So I get up, I get out of bed, I go outside. I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? And Maria goes, there's a helicopter hovering over our place. And it hovered there
Oh.
for 10 minutes. Total blacked out helicopter. The
See,
next thing,
I think they're very much aware of the Sasquatch phenomena.
and the next day, the Sasquatch stuff stopped. No more drinking of the hummingbird feeder. No more flower picking. Nothing. All gone.
That's
All,
very suspicious.
so we
I
checked.
wonder if they know more than what we think they know, and if
Oh,
they have
they definitely
some
do.
sort of dialogue, or I mean, if the Sasquatch are an actual ET being, or however you want to label them, maybe there is some sort of agreement or dialogue. I don't know, because from my research out on the ranch property, they were well aware of what was happening, not only here but in Montana as well, as mentioned by Bob Solis. So
Yeah, I have a friend
fascinating
that's
stuff.
pretty high up on everything, and we checked the flight records, and there was no flight records of the helicopter. And he said, "Well, there's two things. They either came to tell you that they know that what you do, and they're watching you, or they
Yeah.
came to chase your sugar water drinker back
Sugar
to where they came from."
water.
So
Huh, that is fascinating.
another
And I
mystery.
just moved up here. I just moved up here on some land, and I'm kind of psychically. I would love to, so long as it's cordial, have some sort of encounter, with a Sasquatch. Maybe they'll come and drink my hummingbird feeders this summer.
Well, yeah, you got a good shot at it where you're living.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so.
How high up you are?
Yeah, over 7,000 feet.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I'm outside of Woodland Park, outside of Colorado Springs. So I
nice.
don't know. Maybe I will. I'll let you know if that happens.
Well, always think about it.
Yeah.
Think about it. So we're gonna open up some questions for Miss Katie Paige tonight, and please all capital letters if you guys got any questions. And I want to say thank you for taking time out of your night and day to spend some time with us here. And I'd
Oh,
love to do it again. Like I said, Roswell is a whole nother. I'm fascinated. I'm really am
yeah.
fascinated.
Oh, it was a pleasure to
Hats.
be here, and I just love learning from everybody else. I mean, to me, that's what it's all about. So, because every time you do one of these and you connect with other people, you learn more and more. So it's my pleasure.
That's awesome. And again, we got to come up with the word. You come up with the word, and after the show's over, you guys can leave in the comments the word, and then we'll have a drawing to win her book.
Oh, I get to come up with a word?
Yeah, you can come up with the
Okay.
word.
Can I say white fuzzies? Because that's what my Sasquatches were
That's
called.
it.
White fuzzies.
So if you guys want a copy of her book, I got a picture of it. Hold on, let me pull it up here. I had retina detachment and I can barely see out of both eyes. There it is. So, Letters of Love and Light. If you guys want to win it, in the comments after the show, put in warm fuzzies or white fuzzies?
White fuzzies.
White. So
White
leave like
fuzzies. That's what we called our Sasquatch on the ranch. White fuzzies, because they were white and gray. And somebody asked, is that a skull on the bookcase behind your left shoulder? A skull. I'm trying to see here.
which ones you left.
uh, I have so many little things around me. I have an owl back here in a pyramid. And then, oh, I have a really cool. Hold on. Let me show you this. Hold on. Tangled.
I hate those wires. Oh, that's pretty cool. You got the Bigfoot in there too.
I don't know if that's what she was talking about. I got that in Sedona. It's my UFO Bigfoot candle. Yeah, these are pretty cool. They're called magic candles.
Nice. I like
Isn't
how it
that
lights
neat?
up.
Yeah, isn't
Yeah.
that neat? Yeah, I don't have a skull anywhere. So I'm not sure.
No, it might be me because I got the alien skeleton up
Oh,
there.
oh yeah, back there. Yeah. Oh yeah, you do. Maybe they're talking to you.
All right. Let's see. The report in Martin Saturday to see I saw something somewhere the other day. Well, I guess we didn't. It
Any
went,
questions?
yeah, it went pretty good. That's a good one. We don't get questions. I think we hit the spot. Um, so I'll ask a question.
Okay.
What out of all your investigations everywhere, what is the strangest, craziest experience that you ever heard of?
Well, I like the Tehran Iran encounter. If you look that one up, because it's multiple witness, it's multiple radars, it's fighter jets engaging in this diamond shaped craft. So that's one of my favorite cases. I absolutely love when I went to Marlar's, there was 2 boxes of pilot reports. So I don't know if a lot of your listeners are aware, but just a couple weeks ago, there was a new law passed that gives immunity to whistleblowers. So these military men and women and pilots can come forward with their UFO encounters and have immunity from basically being fired from their position. So we'll see if that actually transpires. So I saw in the comments here, somebody asked to repeat the 2 ET types on the ranch. There was this strange, almost AI type of being that had these tubes and a helmet, very spindly looking, almost like an ant kind of ET. And then there were the Nordics, which are these tall, blonde ET types. I didn't witness these personally, but that's what was reported to be out there. And it was also reported that they were in conflict with one another and that we were just like in the way. So that's what was reported out there. And then why do you think turquoise was used as bait? That's an interesting question. I don't know if it's a property of the mineral, but they also use silver and like aluminum wires. So again, I'm not sure why they chose to use that. There is a heavy Native American history of the area, just as in Skinwalker Ranch. So we had the Cheyenne and Arapaho were in conflict with the Ute tribes out there. We had the Pawnee, uh, the Pawnee, the Kiowa, and the Comanche were also out there. And one of the brutalist Native American attacks was right there, right on the border of Elbert County by the ranch property called the Sand Creek Massacre, where hundreds of men and women and children were brutally murdered right there. So there's a lot of horrific, you know, um, history of that area in it of itself. And I wonder if the land and the minerals and the rocks and the waters can retain some of that. I don't know, just a theory, because you hear that at Skinwalker as well, and the Navajo as well. Yes, the Navajo too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so these two questions go together. What's your scariest story, and what is the scariest sighting you ever had? So it's one and the same.
Right. What I talked about it earlier that night on the ranch where we had that disembodied electrical voice and the lights going out and the humming sound and the big white bright light out of the window. That was the most terrifying night. And when I got back to my home that evening, we had a house that was an hour away from the ranch. I walk into our front door and we had a door. My stairs went up and we had 2 rooms. I come into the front door and I was paralyzed for a good 5 or 10 minutes. And I can remember my mom and my sister yelling at me, like, "What did you eat? What did you eat?" And I was trying to talk and I couldn't even talk. I was trying to say peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and I couldn't. I finally, like 5 or 10 minutes later, come out of that. I go upstairs in my room and I had my first full blown migraine headache that night. I suffered those for years, like severe migraines, until I finally went through biofeedback training. But I don't know if that was connected to whatever that light was on the ranch property. That for sure was the scariest encounter. But after that, too, that sense of always being watched and these shadow beings in my room, I never slept alone. I always slept with my big sister. We put the bed against the wall, that whole thing. Make sure the closet door is shut, check under the bed, that whole thing. I never slept alone after that. I was always terrified. So yeah, that it was all a very scary time. And in fact, I was discussing that with Heidi Hollis. We were talking about how these events can be really terrifying and scary, especially when you're a child and you don't understand any of this stuff. It's the boogeyman. It's scary. And then the adults are telling you, you have it's just a dream. You've had a bad dream. You have an overactive imagination, all those things. And you shut down and you don't talk to anybody about it after a while, especially when you're told not to talk about it. But later, as I got older, it shifted into a more positive kind of thing and spirituality opened up and all these synchronicities started happening. So I don't know if that's all connected, but that's been my experience. And so many other people I talk to have the same kind of experience with that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Has there been any human mutilations reported, such as in South America? Well, I have a friend of mine who has looked into these human mutilations on the dark web. I don't check out the dark web, but I've seen some of these photographs and they're terrifying. I haven't researched much about the human mutilations, but I do know they're reported and I do know they're photographed and I do know there's some in the United States. And I question that even with David Pilates and his missing 411, what's happening there and where are these people going? And I hope that's not the case. Like that's terrifying to me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Blue Eye Northern asks, my understanding they moved MUFON headquarters just outside of Cincinnati. Is there a reason for the new location?
Yeah, the new location is because we have a new executive director. So David McDonald. So we went from Irvine, California to Cincinnati, and the MUFON Symposium will be out there this August. So I will be out there and we'll be doing field investigator training out there on Thursday, and we'll be hanging out there that weekend. I want to say it's the third weekend of August. You can go to MUFON.com and learn more about that here in the near future.
And then you
Yeah.
can become a STAR investigator.
STAR investigator. Yeah,
Right.
being a MUFON field investigator, it's a lot of lights in the skies and it's a lot of work on your computer. So it's not like what a lot of people think, where you're out there with your field kit on location. We do get cases like that from time to time, but most of them are, looking at Stellarium and Flight Radar 24 and Heavens Above. And, a lot of reports we get are Starlink satellites and mundane kind of things. So, but from time to time, we get really, really good, interesting cases. And that was a question I had for you. Did you and your wife report your sighting to MUFON?
No, we didn't.
There you go.
That's our second sighting. We've seen two craft together. Everything that I've
Wow.
experienced, there's always been a witness with me. I've never experienced anything alone.
You got to get those reports in. I mean, if nothing else, at least they'll be documented, and I'm hopeful that someday, these reports do get looked at. And so, and we have them going clear back. And I'm hoping someday we'll have great teams of people that can really, what I'm hopeful for actually is like a smart computer that can just run through all this data and, where you'll be able to ask your phone, like, hey, Siri, like, how many triangle crafts have we had over Connecticut, in 1972? And it can just blah, 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 and have your answer. That's what I'm hoping for. So I think it's important that we at least get them reported and documented.
Okay.
Yeah.
I actually live a half hour away from Mark Dan Antonio.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know Mark.
We have a special project that we're doing in April with Mark. So we got members of
Oh,
Mufon, members
nice.
of KGRA, and my
Oh,
thing is
cool.
is BMS, and we are going on a little outing in upper state New York for a
Oh,
couple days,
cool.
and
So
we're
do
going
you
to
do
try
the
out.
Pine Bush UFO Festival too? I was out there last year. That was a blast.
Yeah, I've never been to any festivals. I'm not the festival kind of guy or symposiums or any of that
Well,
kind
this
of
would
stuff.
be a good one to do because it's all outside. It's just like walking up and down Pine Bush, New York, and there's just street vendors, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. So,
All right,
yeah.
we'll check it out. Yeah, we got the son. He wants to, Mark. He's into the tech thing. I mean, he's got his clearance in the Navy is ridiculous,
Right.
and
Right.
he wants to try out some new tech that he thinks that can help in the Sasquatch world. And
Oh, cool.
yeah,
Oh,
so
that's
we're
awesome.
excited. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
unfortunately, I won't be at Pine Bush this year because Contact in the Desert is the same time, and that's in California. So I will be out there at Contact in the Desert, and they have their early bird tickets going on right now. So if any of your listeners are interested in Contact in the Desert, they're going to have over 60 speakers and all sorts of cool brand new events out there as well, and that's out in California.
okay, if you want
So
to link
June 2nd,
anything,
4th.
if you want to link anything for everybody, just send it to me an email after the show, and I'll link it all in
Okay.
the description of the video so they can go back along with
Oh,
your books
perfect.
and everything.
Okay. Yeah, I just have my website at katiepage.net. So I'll send you that.
Okay, so we're going to end the show really soon. I just want you to let everybody know about the newest book that you're writing and how close that is to being done.
Yeah, I'm 4 chapters in, and unfortunately, I've had kind of a turbulent year, so it's been on my back burner for a while. But it is a book on the Colorado Skinwalker Ranch, and I'm hoping to have it done by the end of the summer. I had to move and things, personal things I've went through. So I see another question here, real quick. It says, "What are the signs of a suspect portal? What do you look for?" So I was actually talking to James Keenan about he told me I had him as a guest on our show on KGRA, and he was talking about spinning compasses. So if you're ever walking, I don't know, Chris, if you've done this in your book, Bigfoot. To me, those are magnetic changes or magnetic anomalies, and I would say you need to be careful if that starts to happen. So I thought, well, I do a lot of hiking up here in the Rocky Mountains. I'm going to start carrying a compass. I don't know what to do if it starts spinning. Blow a whistle, help, help. I don't know, but that's something to look for.
Yeah,
Is
we
what
actually
James is
have
saying.
a mutual friend that's actually involved with this little thing that we got going on from the New York State Sasquatch organization. And that's what he says. If you bring your compass with you and you get to that area where you think that if something's going, like a portal's opening or whatever, you're feeling that energy, take your compass out. And if it starts spinning, you're there.
Yeah,
You're
that's terrifying. And then what happens? They start running. I don't know what to do at that point.
right, right, right.
Yeah. Bring flares. I don't know.
Well, I want to thank you so much for spending
Thank
the
you.
time with us tonight. And don't forget, everybody, warm
White
fuzzies.
white fuzzy.
White
White
fuzzies.
fuzzies. White
White,
fuzzies.
how about white warm fuzzies?
White warm fuzzies.
But
That's
again, thank
funny.
you so much, and we would love to have you back because the stuff on the people need to hear the rest of the stories. I'm just curious about how much the war was involved with what was going on back then.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got many questions about that also, and we can't fit it all in 1 hour. So
Right. I'd be happy to be back, and thanks for having me on, Chris.
all
And
right, well,
thanks to
thanks.
everybody. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, and stay backstage, and I'll talk to you in a couple minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Katie Paige. All right, all right, all right. That was one heck of a show. What can I say? She's a wealth of knowledge on ufology, and I know nothing about it. But we're slowly learning. It's a learning process, and I've gone from Sasquatch interactions to all the way to ET interactions now, and even something beyond that I can't explain. Like I said, I am just a grandfather that collected baseball cards. I didn't ask for any of this stuff to happen. I didn't know why it happened, but it has happened, and I want to find the answers, and people like Katie will help us get closer and closer to those answers. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and you know what goes on next. As our buddy Larry always says, get in the woods, people.